Hey, it's Jessie from Squeegee Ink, and welcome back to Printer's Corner. This is the segment where I answer the questions that you've given me over social media, and I answer them in a little bit more depth like this. If you'd like your question answered by us, just use hashtag Printer's Corner or ask us a DM or write in the comments of some of our videos, and we'll pick those up for a future episode. Don't forget to stick around for the end of the episode to find out the results from this week's community poll question. This week's topic is about dip tanks. Our main question is, how long do you leave screens in the dip tank for? We also have a question about how long do you soak the screens and what to do with a screen that has had locked in emulsion. So I'm going to get on to the first question. Our first question is from Zal R, and they said, what products do you use in your dip tank? We use Easyway Supra, which is a solution with water. That's what's in the dip tank at the moment. I've also made at least 2 very thorough videos all about setting up a dip tank and also kind of reclaiming the dip tank, cleaning it out, putting a new solution in, and how to actually siphon the water out. So I'll leave links in the description of those 2 videos. I'm actually going to personally switch to the Franmar one step clear when it comes to the time that this dip tank isn't being very effective. And the reason for that is that Franmar are doing really great work environmentally with their chemicals. And I've just naturally gravitated towards using their Plus Sol ink remover, degreaser, haze remover, and all the other ones. So I might as well have all my chemistry working together how it was designed to be. So I'm going to be shifting over to Franmar very soon. Our next question is from user 288051772373. And this is a question about a TikTok video that we made about decoating screens. And they said, how long do you soak the screens? I would answer that with, I think it's around 2 minutes. It fluctuates slightly because as the dip tank ages, it increases a little bit, but I would say 2 minutes is ideal. And that just allows the chemical in the dip tank to soften up the emulsion to a point where you can rinse it and you're not having to put lots of pressure on it. But you do have to notice this time that you've got the screen soaking in there for, because again, the chemical just becomes less and less effective over time. You can just keep topping up the Supra and like bring it back a little bit more concentrated. I'd also say leave the lid on your dip tank so it's not evaporating in any way, but also you can't leave your screens in there for too long, because if you allow all the emulsion and sludge to get to the bottom of your dip tank, you're also shortening its lifespan and it's just a bit more expensive for you. But to answer your question, you can leave them to soak for about 2 minutes. Our final question today is from Kelso. And again, this is on TikTok. It was about decoating screens. And they said, that is certainly satisfying. Last night, I tried to clean one screen and it is still unfinished. I actually really enjoy the process of decoating screens for the most part, if they're not being tricky. So yeah, I can see why it's satisfying. The way you're saying that it took you a long time to clean out that screen and it's still unfinished, that basically means that your screen is almost certainly locked in. So when we say locked in, it's just where you just can't remove the emulsion no matter how much chemical you put on it. And that tends to happen where you've used decoater on the mesh and the emulsion has kind of like started to come away, but you didn't rinse it off. Then the decoater basically dries in and then it just hardens rock solid. And there's only 2 ways to get that emulsion off at that point. You can either use a pressure washer really close, which risks like damaging the tension on your mesh, or it just takes ages and it's horrendous. Or there are some chemicals that you can use, like the Franmar Unlock. It's basically a solution. It's like a paste that you put on the emulsion, leave it for a few minutes, and it softens it up a bit. It's not going to just drop off, but it doesn't need as much pressure, and that's going to only take a couple of minutes as opposed to going at it with just the pressure of the pressure washer, and you could be there for ages. If you want to get your hands on any of those chemicals, We get them from Screen Print World using our discount code, which is CRP5. That'll get you a little bit money off all of your kind of chemicals and cleaning products, but it's a good one to have on hand. I say I've only used it a few times because when you're doing it in the dip tank, you get into a nice flow, and it's quite hard to lock your screens in if you're using a dip tank. But I definitely did it a few times when I was just using a solution in a bucket and a brush. To recap, the main question from this week's episode was, how long do you leave screens in the dip tank for? And ideally, you're leaving them in there for 2 minutes. I hope that answered all of your questions. It's now time for this week's community poll.
Community poll.
This week's question was, what method do you use to reclaim screens? And the options are Lotus Holland automated screen reclaim, dip tank, bucket and brush, or something else in the comments. And 50% at the moment are saying bucket and brush. I definitely started out with a bucket and brush and I couldn't see any problem with it. But now looking back, having had a dip tank for years, the amount of money I spent on emulsion remover in a bucket, because you kind of slosh it on, you're getting through so much that you don't even realize you're getting through. So the bucket and brush method works, but it is quite labor intensive with all the scrubbing, and it's more than twice as fast with the dip tank because the dip tank basically doing the work while you're rinsing some new screens out, and it's much cheaper, even though the upfront cost is quite considerable. I completely understand that you might not be able to afford it, but get a dip tank next in your list of equipment that you need for your studio. You won't regret it. And that's probably what some of these people who have an automated screen reclaim system are saying to me, because I've only got a dip tank, whereas they're just putting screens on a conveyor belt and the machine's doing all the work and they just have to rinse it afterwards. But those shops probably have lots more screens to reclaim than I do, and the dip tank works just great for our setup. Don't forget to answer next week's community poll on our community tab. You can go through and answer old ones. You can comment on there. You can also ask us fresh questions using #PrintersCorner, and I'll get onto those in a future episode.